Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Baltimore Racial Justice Action's 13th of the month event for February. We are really glad to see your faces. So first of all, my name is Julia Scott, and so I will be helping lead our conversation today. We have a really interesting one that I'm really excited about. But it just lets you know you are being recorded. This will go onto our YouTube channel, so I'm going to let people know ahead of time before we get started. And all right, so I'm going to ask Dana to set up our wonderful PowerPoint that we have. So we're hoping that you had seen some of the video that went over BRJA, who we are, how to help us sustain by donating and learning a little bit more information about our history. If you were interested in watching last month's event, you can certainly put your phone to this QR code so you can see it. We had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Wendy Shaya about her book, The Black Cell. So we're hoping that you take a look at that. It's on our YouTube channel. You can look at that on BaltimoreRacialJusticeAction.com on YouTube, not .com. For our next slide, if you want to continue to support our 13th events, we have another one coming up March 13th at 6 p.m. doing underreported news. We have done one of those in the past, so if you want to see what that's like, you can still go on our YouTube channel and look at that, but please make sure you save up, put it on your calendars for March 13th. That should be a really interesting conversation. And here we are for today's event, which is, should Black History Month be canceled? So we're going to get into some of the history, strategy, and analysis, examining what does this historical month mean in 2023 and beyond. And so I'm going to pass the torch on over to Anthony, who is going to be leading our conversation today. So Anthony, you got the floor.
Thank you, Julia. So yes, should Black History Month be canceled? Can you take that down for a second, Dana? I'm not ready for that one yet. Should it be canceled? And so this is an age-old question since Negro History Week started back in the 1920s of what do we need this week for? Why is it important? Why should it be, should there be a national acknowledgement for it, all the way to it changing to Black History Month, all the way to us being in the 2020s and folks still asking the question, should we still have Black History Month? And so we want to start off with time for you to grab a piece of paper and pen, and you're going to write for a little bit about why you think that it should, you shouldn't, why it shouldn't be canceled, why you're kind of in the middle, things that you're contemplating about it when this topic comes up, of Black History Month being canceled. What are the things that you're like, I feel very passionate about this, I'm really confused about this? Go ahead and write those things down. Give some time for that. I'm gonna give about one more minute. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through some slides. And in those slides, it's going to talk about, I did a lot of listening and reading of articles of why it should and shouldn't be, and took some quotes from some of the things that I went through. And so as we go through these, I'm going to ask for some crowd participation at the end. And so they'll have the reason why it should or why it shouldn't be related to a specific thing. And we're going to have fun. I'm going to ask you all to use an emoji if it's like, oh yeah, that was one of my reasons, or that's one of those things that I have questions or concerns about. So let's go ahead to the first slide. Okay, the first one, the debate about Black History Month being a month versus all year. On the side of it should be canceled. We should celebrate Black History Month all year. We don't need a month, but we should be Black History it up every day. Black history is American history. Keeping it in a month further segregates Black history. Go ahead, put an emoji in there if that was one of your points. And then I'm gonna go to the Black History Month should be canceled, the month versus the year. A reason of it being canceled, Black history lessons, AP African American courses, and conversations about race in the workplace are being extinguished. Learning Black history is already a controversial act that is met with fire and resistance. Trusting that America will interweave Black history in our white American history lessons is a long shot. Put an emoji if that was one of your thoughts that crossed your mind or something you feel strong about. Okay. Seeing some thumbs up for those. And it's fine if one of your things was like, that was my reason why I thought that it's on the cancel side, but that's the reason why I thought it should be kept. It's fine. Just if the quote kind of resonates with you at all. For folks that are just coming in, we are going through some of the reasons why people are saying Black History Month should or shouldn't be canceled. And so as we go through these, you put an emoji up if you're like, that resonates with me. I kind of feel the same way about that, or I have feelings about that. So that's what we're doing right now. To our next slide, Dana. When we're talking about schools in Black History Month, on the Black History Month should be canceled side, non-Black teachers are leading conversations about Black History Month. Many of them aren't equipped to navigate the conversations that follow these history lessons. This can lead to Black students ending their lessons with the wrong takeaways. Give an emoji if that resonates with you, maybe a concern that you had or something that you agree with. Okay. And let's go to the canceled side. For many students, it's the only opportunity to learn about Black history. US textbooks and curriculums keep cutting and whitewashing Black history out. So that's a reason of it not being canceled. Give an emoji if you've had that kind of thought.
What do we do if we're in the middle?
If you just had like, hey, you don't have to be on the specific side, but if kind of like this course of thinking or this thread is something that's crossed your mind and been a concern with it, still put an emoji up. Okay. Nice, nice. See some emojis for that one. Let's go to our next slide, Dana. Okay, Black History Month from a wide view. Reason for it being canceled. Black History Month is used for big corporations to pretend that they support Black freedom and liberation. They even have the audacity to sell products decked out in Pan-African colors so they can make a profit. I prefer the month be canceled instead of seeing rich companies profit off of our history. Emoji if that resonates for you. That's a thought, something that you've crossed your mind. Seeing some hands up for this one. Okay. On the cancel side, Black History Month is observed and celebrated nationwide. It makes corporations, workplaces, politicians, etc., acknowledge the Black history and progress in the ways that they do not in the other 11 months as a reason that it shouldn't be canceled. Throw up an emoji if that's something that resonates with you. Nice. Okay, next one. White people. White people in Black History Month. So, should be canceled. White people don't know how to act. They start being very performative and put on their best good white people face. They use the month to show how woke they are in front of their Black friends and colleagues. It's exhausting to be around. Sometimes I'm forced to interact with them when they are displaying this level of caucasity. And I should really be getting a paycheck because I can't get that time back. Go ahead and throw up an emoji if you resonate with that. Even a laughing emoji there, okay. And on the canceled side, on should not be canceled side, Black history is American history. It's especially important that white people not only learn this history, but use it as their GPS. Learning the history of Black resistance, freedom, and struggle is a direct roadmap that explains how and why America is anti-Black. Sadly, if it weren't for Black History Month, many white people would not even dip their toe into Black history. An emoji if you've thought about that. Nice. Okay. So hopefully this dug up a lot of your like, oh yes, it should be, it shouldn't be, questions, concerns. How do other people feel about this? How do I feel about this? I'm kind of on the fence for some things. We wanted to do a good, like, unearth a good buffet of questions for you going into this. And so now we're gonna move into a little bit of history. We always make sure that we are centering these conversations and rooting them in US history. And so Dana is gonna play an audio clip of an NPR story, probably with some familiar speakers on here, some speakers that you're familiar with. And we're gonna listen to that history and then do some journaling again, and then talk as a large group. So whenever you're ready, Dana.
There's an ongoing debate about Black History Month. Does it uplift Black stories or does it segregate history? NPR's Sandia Dirks reports while Black history is more than a month, February still matters, especially now.
When did you first learn about Black history? Was it at home, from your parents?
I mean, we celebrated Black history every single day of the year.
Or maybe at church?
I mean, I was getting more about Black History Month in the Black church than I was in my majority Black school.
That's Hassan Kwame Jeffries,
Associate Professor of History in the Department of History at The Ohio State University.
and Carsonia Wise Whitehead.
The founding executive director for the Carson Institute for Race, Peace, and Social Justice at Loyola University in Baltimore, Maryland.
Whitehead also used to be the national secretary for ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. It's the current incarnation of the organization founded by the man who's responsible for Black History Month.
Dr. Carter G. Woodson.
Carter G. Woodson.
He founded Negro History Week in 1926. Picking the week in February, Abraham Lincoln was born, and Frederick Douglass chose as his birthday.
The idea was to make resources available for teachers, Black teachers, to celebrate the contributions that Black people had made to America.
Here's the historical context. This is the decade after the film Birth of a Nation, just after Red Summer, where white supremacists violently attacked Black neighborhoods and towns, when lynchings were common. History professor Hassan Jeffries says it's also when the lost cause myth was taking deep root. That's the lie that obscures the reason the South fought the Civil War, which, to be clear, was to preserve chattel slavery.
A complete revision of the Civil War, of slavery, of emancipation, of Reconstruction was being deeply embedded into the American public education system.
So, Negro History Week. Flash forward to the 1970s, in the midst of some civil rights victories, it becomes nationally recognized as Black History Month. And where it has the most profound impact is exactly where Woodson intended it to, in the classroom. But Woodson probably didn't intend some of the ways that worked out.
In school, all of a sudden, everything became about Black people, right? So you put up the pictures of King, and you're putting, mac and cheese and collard greens into the cafeteria.
It was like, hey, let's talk about Black people for a couple days, right?
That felt insulting, that we were invisible for 11 months out of the year, but now suddenly we were visible in February.
That's Shakri Hassan Tillman. He's a filmmaker and writer, and about a decade ago, He tried to cancel Black history.
Okay, so I want everyone to take a few moments and write about what are you hearing about the strategy for when it was Negro History Week back in the 1920s? What was the strategy then? And what did you hear from the audio about what type of resistance was happening in the United States? Okay, now here's the part where we're gonna ask everybody to join in. Go ahead and cut on your video if you're able to, so we can see each other. So it feels like we're in a small room together, sharing our beautiful thoughts and ideas. And I'm also gonna, Julia and Erica are also gonna help me facilitate through this conversation, this large group conversation. And so first, let's go to that question. What did you hear was the strategy in the 1920s? And what did you hear as far as history was happening that kind of motivated for Negro History Month? What was the motivation behind it? And you can just come off mute and start speaking.
One of the things that I was really hearing was Black History or Week as a response to basically asserting humanity and asserting like dignity in the face of like an increase in sort of an increased wave of racism that was happening in the country at that time.
Yes. Other folks?
I think that one of the things that gets lost a lot of the time around like Negro History Week is that, I mean, like, I think a lot of the time it was for Black people. Like, it was a way for Black people to know like what was going on within their communities, to celebrate those things, but also outside of those communities, like what were Black people doing in other places. As part of the reason why like Black newspapers were a huge part, like, you know, of getting the word out about the week. So I think that it wasn't necessarily something for everyone, as it was about Black people having inherent dignity in themselves and their communities. So they were in the know, and so they knew what was going on with them.
Thanks, Julia.
Julia, I think important to add, and we probably will get to this in a couple of minutes, but the evolution from the week that's for Black people to who has the authority to rename it, name it, describe how long it is, the agendas, the activities that go on, and all that later on. So really investigating that evolution as part of the analysis of whether or not it should be canceled.
Thanks, Erica.
One thing that kind of stuck out to me, which I actually didn't know, was that it was kind of centered around the time of Abraham Lincoln's birthday. But yes, he did have his hand in the emancipation of slaves. But if you look back at quotes about what he actually said, and I will paraphrase this, but he actually did not want slaves to be freed at all. Like he said that like if there was another way, he would have taken it, as opposed to like freeing or emancipating slaves. So I don't know. I just think it's a bunch of fucking bullshit, and like that's where I'm at with it.
Absolutely. There's so much miseducation around how Abraham Lincoln is listed as a hero for Black folks. Other folks' thoughts?
And Bill Clinton and other, I mean, like, so this is right. Like, you know, who is the authentic author? Who are our heroes? And when we think about when and whether or not it should be canceled, one of the reasons I think I had an emoji up, like, you know, this is just like kind of performative, is because what happens is that these figures in history get fossilized as one way. Like, we never think about the very complex MLK that was closer to Malcolm X than he was to, like, I Have a Dream. So I think that too is part of the conversation about, like, you know, do we cancel something? Or do we have these conversations about something when people are not equipped to have legitimate conversations about the topic? So do we just settle for what they give us because it's an acknowledgement, or do we just kind of cancel it? And so I think that somewhere in the middle there lies the answer.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because this kind of reminds me, particularly with the MLK example, is that, you know, when MLK Day came around, like my dad, who's currently in his 70s, 76, he always tells me the story about how MLK Day was not for everybody. He was like, it was going to be a day that Black people just took off from work. It was a way of them honoring him. And then it became, of course, like, oh, well, it should be an official day. We should, like, you know, make it for everybody. And it's like, I do think that when we do invite folks in, remembering like what it means to invite people in, like what happens. I think Erica's kind of talking about that, like what story, you know, what stories get whitewashed, like, because Abraham Lincoln for a very long time, it was like, oh, well, he freed the slaves. Now, obviously, we have more information now. We have a better understanding now. But at the rate that things are happening in our country, I think it's really important to point out that, you know, that's not the story that the majority of people have. Like, quite literally just last night during the Super Bowl, somebody was like, oh, well, this is the first Super Bowl with two Black QBs. And it just happens to be, you know, Abraham Lincoln's birthday. So look at that. And it was like, really? Like, that's the connection. So I think it just kind of lets you know, even with all the information and people pushing back and trying to set the record straight, that's a lot harder when you're trying to get that out to the masses. And, you know, when you have it in your textbooks, which we know are political, like, tools, in our education system, it's very difficult to push back if that's the main story. Just, I think, remembering.
Let's sit right there with the textbooks. Anthony, in one of the slides, you talked about like all the stuff in the textbooks, and I can't even think about, well, one of the things that came to mind was the infrequency in which these textbooks are updated and available en masse and new to people to have the most current information in it. So there are these questions, but they have to be contextualized in terms of what the reality of what we can achieve, given the resources we are in. So do I want somebody who is ill-equipped to teach my 7-year-old about Black History Month from a 1950s textbook? Is that the question I was asking? Because that's a whole lot of context there that would make me change my emoji from thumbs up to thumbs down.
And I want to go back to Julia's, right? Okay, it sounds like we're going to get into these scenarios that had the quotes. So I want to go to Julia's first. And if the strategy was, so there's a strategy behind let's have Black History Month, or let's have MLK Day be acknowledged on a national scale, right? And I can see part of that strategy being, if we do that, then we can actually get the day off, or we can actually, like, for Black folks who are oftentimes occupy most of the space as frontline workers and things, we can also actually be able to celebrate and observe these things. But then knowing the United States as we do, oh, we can't just give Black people something and not give it to everybody. So we have to make this universal to everyone. Let's stick with that. Where do we in the strategy say, is it better to say, let's just not make it national and go mainstream? Or is it let's go mainstream and then let's try to do the fight and trying to educate non-Black folks on how this should be celebrated or what their lane is? And do we trust that that's even possible? So I'm gonna throw that out there.
I'm gonna push it back on you because, well, MLK as a figure for the day, right? Like that's why him, not others. What does he serve? What role does he serve to be exalted? I mean, honestly, there in some homes growing up, I would see a picture of a white Christ and MLK, and the deification of this, right? So what it does in this deification process to give us a olive branch or olive, what do you call it, fig leaf? What do you extend
Olive branch works.
Olive branch.
Okay.
Thank you. When you do that, that too is in service of a white supremacist ideology about here's who your hero should be over all others. And let's not forget that MLK reluctantly went into that role. So we have to think about complex human beings and what they add to the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I remember, I forgot who said it. It might have been Ta-Nehisi Coates. So he was talking about, well, he posed the question, why are all of your like leaders non-violent and all of theirs are violent? It's like, so like it kind of gets into this idea that all the people they push, who are like our Black people who are supposed to be leaders, it's like, it's the usual story for one during Black History Month. We never get into like the other side, right? So it's like it's MLK, it's Rosa Parks, it's Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, very, particular stories that are allowed to be told. If you bring up, for a very long time, Malcolm X was taught as kind of like the opposite of MLK, and that he was violent and it was wrong and he was evil, all this stuff. And I think with MLK, I will never forget years ago, especially with like social media, like clockwork, February 1st, every single person, every political person, every actor, let's remember MLK, and they always use the same quote, like, he dreamed of one day of little white girls and Black boys. Just like, okay, we get it. They all use the same thing. But what was also happening is like when Black people or other folks of color were pushing back on certain statements or whatever, something was happening, they would say, well, remember what MLK said? And it would be like, that's actually not even the real MLK. Y'all don't know about the real MLK. Like, y'all keep talking about this kind of sanitized version of him when he also said these things. And so I've seen a lot more pushback against that narrative, and like people being like, oh, like I didn't know about this speech. It's like, yeah, like maybe you should read that one. Maybe you should question why people turned on him. Like, because that's never discussed. Like, it's discussed in my house, but I think like the national conversation is never like, it was always like he was doing so well and everybody loved him, and then he just happened to be shot. It's just like, no, that's not the story. So I think there's been a lot of pushback, but like I said, on a national level, I don't see that often. And also, I don't have kids, but I'm not just worried about the white teachers teaching kids this information. It is also extremely harmful to have Black people and other folks of color doing it without the lens and the nuance that is needed to discuss these stories. But I mean, in history in general, to be quite honest, but definitely when it comes, I think, to Black History Month.
So we are gonna start getting into the strategy part because I can't talk about this anymore without that. So I want to get into we're in 2023, sorry. We're in 2023. Part of the conversation about Black History Month can just be canceled is that we don't have the exact same issues that we had in the 1920s, right? That there's this move and this wave of Black excellence. We've had a Black president, and like, it's just not as necessary anymore. It's like one of those arguments, right? But what I want to focus on is is the strategy different? Is the focus different than what it was from the 1920s? If so, how is it? And how do we need to adjust today's strategy if it is different? And if it's the same, then I want to hear more about how it's the same as it was from the 1920s.
I mean, up until this point, I continue to see things as very performative. And, speaking about, the direction of Black history and how it's been presented, it has been whitewashed. It has been cut down to this very cookie cutter form. And they say that like those who control history win the war or whatever. This is all being done in a very, in my opinion, very calculated and, oppressive way, because, it's all very intentional to me. So, going back to like what is actually happening, every month out of the year versus just like that 1 month out of the year, like, no, this is not the time for you to, I guess, finally start talking about white supremacy and systemic racism and all that. Like, no, this is work, and this is work that you will be doing for the rest of your life if you really want to be an ally, or if you really want to dismantle these systems. I don't know. I'm not going to take up too much time, but that's what's coming up for me.
It's also reminded me of the ways in which, as we talk about Black History Month evolving, how it is everything, and what did they say, the kitchen sink, how it has moved from education from Black folks to be able to learn about their ancestors and other strategies that are happening in other cities, to, okay, this is the time of the month that if you want to do racial justice work, we do it now. If we want to make a statement about Black lives, we do it now. If we want to do celebration, it's now. It's like all lumped into the February, for lots of activities that and lots of learning and practice that could be happening year round, but it's segmented and segregated into the February. Erica, you look like you have something to say.
No, I was thinking about it clinically, right? And so we have Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but that doesn't mean that we stop treating and delivering chemotherapy and other kind of life-saving techniques throughout the rest of the year. And if we think about it as like white supremacist racism, anti-Black racism, as the disease that it actually is, then we could acknowledge it during February and continue to treat the disease or find a cure from the disease every other day of the year. And quite frankly, the only person I've seen to do like a call out to, Black History Month or Black history every single day was Tom Joyner. Is he still on the air? Am I showing my age?
He's not.
Okay, so he used to do Black History Month 365. But that's all I heard of it. But I mean, I think if we turn it on its head a little bit, and I think this is a strategy that could get us at the both end, right? It is corrective 365 days of the year, and we can celebrate aspects of it for nuance and for awareness and for general education during the month of February.
And so let me ask you specifically, and I want to ask the entire group too, but because you were the last one who said it and made it pop in my head. The celebration, the observation of Black History Month, and I've heard folks say things that hint at, but white people, but the white people part. There's like the part of the we as Black folks, and it seems like a different type of strategy, different type of celebration or observation. When you're talking about it, is that included in the 365, including white people in part of that strategy, or just Black folks or Black and non-white folks?
That's an interesting question, and it's given me pause for a couple of reasons. And I think that the main reason it's given me pause is that I firmly believe that Black history is the United States history, right? We cannot really separate it. And so to have it so that we're only able to only Black people to celebrate it during the month of February seems rather counterintuitive to that statement. At the same time, when we talk about celebration, I quiver and cringe at like the performative aspects. Hyun, is that how you say your name?
Hyun.
Young said earlier, where like, yeah, we're just gonna do this and act like we care about it for a second. Essentially, the shucking and jiving of corporations to say that we're down, or oh, it's that time again for us to care about Black Lives Matter and turn it off on the 28th, right? And so then we're having this entertainment, like, hey, let's have some food, let's have some fried chicken, watermelon, and collard greens to celebrate it. So yeah, I'm at a conundrum. It's hard to get to a space where I could say to not find value also in the performative, because I feel like it still acknowledges. And it may be that, and it probably is, that we have not come as far as we like to think we have on this evolution of just simply affirming our own humanity, right? And that we, as other humans, have joy and can be celebrated.
So yeah, I mean, I think when you were talking about strategy, it's funny because the clip that you had brought up, the kind of podcast talks about the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. So like Carter G. Woodson, of course, is what they essentially talk about Black History Month every year, and they have annual themes every single year that we don't discuss. And so I think that I feel like some of the foundational stuff is there. I think it is up to us to maybe get back to basics and talking about how do we talk about Black History Month. It's not enough to put up a flyer and put MLK and to play, that speech 1,000,001 times and talk about Rosa on the bus. Like, we can do that while also talking about, the theme. Like, so funny enough, this year's theme is Black resistance. Like, so how does Black resistance actually show up? And it gets into, like how it gets into sports, medicine, like all of those things should be discussed. I think that we could be pointing out, working with newspapers to say, okay, what are you all doing like this month to focus? And not just on this small piece of history, not just on Black History Month, but like, what are actual Black people doing? How has resistance informed other resistance movements? How are people continuing the work? How are people teaching it? Like, all of those things could be put into, every single month, every single day of the year. I think that it is going to be on all of us to really, to come up with that strategy of getting back to basics. And I think that I think it's difficult not to include other people. I think that in that kind of, relearning, that we talk about, like, this is what we have been doing. This is what we need to be doing. This is what we need everybody else to do. I don't think it's a problem to have ask of white people, like, of what they should be if what we need. If they're going to listen to it during February, then give them something to listen to, like, and actually have them, like, see if they're going to actually do it. But I think that we really do have to reevaluate what this actually means, and how we're going about it. And corporations, I know McDonald's used to have the whole like 365 commercial. I haven't seen one yet, but I'm sure it's not too far behind. Like, they do a 365 commercial every single year, and it's like, oh, okay, that's nice. But what are you doing like the rest of the year? What commercials are you putting on? What money are you giving? Like, those are things to think about too.
Thank you. What other strategies came up for folks as we were writing and talking about strategies in our current reality with Black History Month? And I'm also putting in here that in the United States, we all celebrate, observe, avoid whatever with Black History Month. And so all of us can have opinions and experiences on, not just the Black folks in the room, on what strategy is moving forward. So.
Hi, I'm TJ. I really liked what sorry, was it a J Scott? Was it Julia?
Yeah.
I really liked what you were saying about if we, I feel like I was hearing, if we expect the performance, like if we expect me to perform at some point, then I do think it gives, like if that's the expectation, then knowing that that's going to happen, I do think it's a great chance. I think for me to be like pushed as a white person to hear people say, oh, so it's Black History Month, you're out here performing, I see you performing, and I hope to do this more myself, like of myself and others, like, hey, I see y'all performing, and just like you said, so how does the performance end? Like, what's the next step? What's the push? And I feel like it is a great opportunity to keep asking that question every February. I think it would be great to be able to ask it 365, but I do think personally, with my limited experience where it is now, it is a great time every year to be able to say, okay, y'all out there performing, myself included, how do you build on this year's performance? And hopefully it begins to slide away from performative, though that might take another several generations.
TJ, as I thought about what you were saying, and I think it may be like the performance part that was resonating with me. So this idea of accountability, but we're asking for accountability every day. We still asking for them to lock up the folks that kill Black people, unarmed Black people. Like, we still ask it. I mean, that doesn't stop. And so if we get to the question around canceling or not, could it be so cut and dry, like, stop faking? Like, let's stop the dogs. Let's stop the dog whistle, and just, if you're gonna be horrible, be horrible. If you're not going to deliver justice, then don't pretend. And so certainly that's what comes to mind when I hear what you say, TJ, and I think about the should we cancel it, should we not cancel it debate.
And part of it for me is the should we or should we not, and thinking about specifically what white people are doing in Black History Month, and the labor that it takes for Black people to then say, this is what you should be doing, or this is what we expect. At that point, I'm like, you know what? I just want to do whatever with my Black folks, and I don't want to do a whole thing with everybody, right? And so the question is, there's so much, as Erica is saying, throughout the year that we see that white folks can be doing as co-conspirators, allies, or just sitting and learning and practicing, right? And so why would Black folks who in a month should be celebrating or being in a space of joy, or if it wants to be wherever space that Black folks want to be for Black History Month, move from that to help white folks get some direction on where to go or how to move, right? Again, when this should be happening year round, is another thing that I'm thinking about with the strategy, which is the complicated part for me. That's is it an all? And if it's an all, then what is that going to require of me? What kind of labor is that going to require from me if it's an all? Other thoughts on what came up for folks when thinking about strategies?
This isn't a strategy yet. This is maybe getting towards a strategy, but one of the things that I'm really thinking about is I'm thinking about the transition into a Black History Month that was more quote unquote universally celebrated as it moved outside of the Black community, and the sort of like simultaneous desegregation, or at least desegregation by law, of schools. And the things that were lost as many Black teachers were pushed out of the classroom and white teachers started to teach Black kids, and the harm that has been done. And also the cover that desegregation by law has given the illusion that it's given of progress.
Mhm.
And so it's not a strategy, but I guess it's thinking about maybe the other strategy of other folks that's being combated.
I mean, I hear that
Yeah.
a strategy to examine the history differently, right? In talking about the way that Black teachers were pushed out of the classroom is not something that's part of the conversation that we often have, right? So yeah.
No, it's that classrooms were desegregated and everything was happier,
Mhm.
which is, yeah.
I mean, I think that I'm always really interested for folks, because I mean, I am firmly on the side of not canceling Black History Month. I think that in this country, it can get, I understand the reasons why someone would want to. I just don't trust doing it, because even for all of its issues and people performing and all of that other kind of stuff, I think that it does force people to remember things that they would rather not remember. And it forces people and groups and organizations to have conversations like these, or to maybe look up the history. And so I'm always interested in, like, for people who are saying, like, you know what, I think we've moved past this. Like, what is the strategy to keep history, Black history, particularly at the forefront? Because that's something I don't really hear. I always hear, like, oh, well, it should be celebrated 365, but how? Like, what is the strategy there?
And I'm like, we're still struggling to keep the little bit that we have.
Right. So, like, I'm
As we-
always like, what is the plan?
Mhm.
Feels post-racial in nature, so I do cringe at it a bit. I think when we think about the question to cancel or not cancel, it speaks to a reality that we've never had. We've never really lived in a situation where a simple Black or white was accessible. And so very often we had to live into the gray. So all those revisionist people that say what they would have done on the Amistad or any of the other ships coming across the big old pond here, or what they would have done in terms of revolting or whatever, negate the heroism of trying to live within a system and change it internally, right? And so to say, yes, we should continue on because we at least have established, it may not be perfect, but we can continue to perfect it. Rather just saying, like, no, we don't have it. I don't know. I just feel like that binary is hard,
Mhm.
because it doesn't reflect the choices we actually have.
Mhm.
One thing that's also kind of coming up for me, I don't know if this is going to be a strategy or not, but I think when I specifically think about Black communities, I think about lots of trauma, like deep within, and like how much healing actually needs to happen, and the allowance of spaces, potentially safe spaces, for that healing to begin. And I don't know if I'm looking at this from the point of view of like affinity spaces where people are together that look like each other, and they have collective experiences, and through that healing among selves, maybe that branching out. And I'm coming from a space of like the psychedelic realm. I'm part of the Baltimore Psychedelic Society, and we intentionally have spaces that are BIPOC, that are trans, that are non-binary, that are women, that are men, and when we can collectively come together with community, what does that look like, and how we can bring that out into the world. So I don't know. I don't know if like I don't I will I do resonate and agree that I don't think Black History Month should be canceled. I do worry about like what could become beyond that if it is canceled. But maybe Black History Month, like I don't know, strategizing to provide like more legitimate healing to the Black community. Like maybe that's like where it starts. And I don't know if that starts with like an array of different modalities, holistic modalities to like, you know, provide to the Black community. Yeah, there's just a lot going on and I'm spitballing, and like, please feel free to like critique me if like I'm overstepping boundaries or something like that. I don't know.
I mean, like, I will say, I think that what you just expressed, one of the things that I think we don't always talk about is like, you know, we're in 2023, and a lot of the work that we do, you know, obviously has been happening for generations. But like I said, like that kind of refocusing is also about like talking about the healing piece that I don't think we always talk about. I know the people who do that work are really kind of bringing that home, creating spaces for people to understand, like, because dredging a lot of this history up and living with history is rough. And so what does it actually translate to and like into care? So that's something that should be definitely added. Yeah, I'm still thinking about some more stuff that you were saying. So that's the one thing that popped in my head.
I'm also thinking about the healing is so easier to be said than to be done, right? That even the ability to have the resources, to have the time, to have the like professionals or the community leaders there for folks to come together to be in a healing space, right? It's not a one-off or 1 hour thing. It's not a special, yeah, let's spend the Monday of MLK Day and do that, right? And I think that folks that are not Black have a different idea of what healing would be for Black people, right? And that Black people would then leave whatever healing space is and be like, oh, I am ready to hold hands with white folks and sing Kumbaya now, right? And so I want to put that out there, and then also recognize that oftentimes the healing that Black people are craving for or actually want, other groups aren't ready for, right? Because we can't actually heal without digging into those traumas, the traumatic racial histories, right? And I don't think that the United States is ready for us to do that type of healing, right? It's very much surface level. So I want to put that out there, is that even having a space to be that is offered to us that is actually safe for us to do that healing and come back into the world with everyone else, I don't think the United States is ready for that.
Yep. And I also want to jump on that healing part, because I often wonder where, you mentioned safe spaces, and I'm still trying to find that place for Black folks, right? Because even if we're able to congregate en masse, there is a social cost for leaving the front door. Actually, you don't have to leave the front door, right? We've seen that. You don't have to leave the front door. There's a social cost for traveling, being en masse. And Julia's right, you know, she says like, versus telling the truth. And so what is it about that mass congregation, the criminalization of Black life, that also criminalizes Black healing? Right? Like, I just wonder where that safe space is. And certainly don't expect some entity, some benevolent government entity with the means to allocate resources to make it available to Black folks to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, like I look at it's like certain, you know, nothing is perfect. Like I look at the pushback that something like 1619 Project gets, and I'm just like, if y'all are upset about this, right? Like you're upset about someone saying that we were brought over here and we essentially like helped build this nation. If you're upset about that and you're calling that revisionist, I mean, like, you're not ready for like real, you know, when they were talking about in 2020, when they had like the racial reckoning, I was like, what reckoning? Like, do we know what that word means? Because it wouldn't just be parts of America that would, you know, I think implode. It's like, we're talking about a real discussion on what it meant and what it means to be Black in this country, what happened to build this country up. And then also, like I said, that opens up the floodgates for not just us, but for whole other scores of people. So like a lot of it is like, you know, Black folks end up being kind of the linchpin in a lot of this, because if you talk about us and what you did to us, you can't forget about the indigenous people, like what you did to them. You can't, you know, forget about the Asian folks and what you've done to them. It's like, you know, all of these other people end up being, I think, encompassed in this story of how this country was made. And so it's a lot easier to just kind of be like, MLK gave a really good speech once, and he wants us all to be friends and to hold hands. And that's what this month is about. Like, that's what America does. Like, it becomes this beautiful beacon of hope, as opposed to like, yeah, this place is kind of, you know, really awful and harmful. So the truth telling has to come from somewhere, though. Like, that's the only thing I do know, is that even in the face of all of this, people who look like us have been telling the truth, and those stories have to be passed down. So it's on us. And maybe that's also part of it. Part of the strategy is not so much just worrying about the whole elephant, but what can we eat? I can talk to people in my community. I can make sure that folks who look like me know this information. The ones that don't, who care, they can get on that too, but they need to be doing that work for folks in their community as well. It may not get to Congress like next month, next year, but I think that as the work is being done, it's important for us to kind of have that in our little notebook, that this is just part of it. But America is a very interesting place, and I think part of the reason why the truth telling and the healing is not something, we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. I think I mean, to really do it well and do it justice could be like the catalyst for civil war. That's how deep this goes, right?
Yeah.
But I also, at the same time, you know, part of me revels in the fact that they call 2020 the year reckoning, because I thought that it was finally an opportunity, a wellspring of righteous indignation across, that we could actually make some longstanding institutional changes, right? And so that, but, you know, folks, you know, stopped caring after a little bit, even though the same actions kept happening. The Derek Chauvins of the world kept killing other people. And I don't know, but I honestly, there are days when, like you said, wait till next year, maybe we'll try something else next year. I feel exhausted by that dream deferred. Right? So maybe there is the long strategy, Anthony, and maybe there's the short-term strategy. Either way, it will change, it will require a fundamental change in the society that I think is tantamount to civil war.
I want to get to, I think it's Samira, John, and then Dana. I know you're teching, but if you want to chime in, were there specific particular things that you were like, this is what is annoying me about Black History Month, why I think it should be canceled, why I think it should stay, and I have a strategy or some ideas around how to start at least thinking about this part of Black History Month that irritates me the most or excites me the most.
I can go. I think one thing that I was thinking about, the speaker on my laptop is sometimes bad, so let me know if you can't hear me. something I was thinking while people were talking was I feel like some of the strategies are inhibited by how I think there are a lot of people who are essentially like they're not good faith actors, right? So like I think for example, like every year there's people who like quote, like we said, like who quote MLK and you point out like the hypocrisy of like what they're saying, like you're quoting MLK and like the week before you like proposed a bill to like ban protests and like but like they don't care about being coming off as hypocritical. Like it's not a problem for a good number of like policymakers in the country, a good number of like, and so I think like that is where I struggle, and I think that's where with some people like what I think some of what Anthony said it resonated is like to me Black History Month is useful as like a way to ensure certain things are like in curricula for children in schools. It's not, it feels, to me, it doesn't feel as like relevant or useful for like people who are not in school, who like it's not like it doesn't feel like a thing to organize around or to like because at that point like yeah, I think like focusing on these bad faith actors is a waste of like your energy, and I think like finding ways to, you know, as people were talking about like working within like the communities of people who like can, for example, just like having this conversation, you know, like one thing that struck me while looking through like while going through the slides, like the different like reasons for like why we should or should not cancel Black History Month, like one thing that's through like a through line through all those arguments, regardless of which side they are, is like they all like believe racism is real. They all believe like there is racism and that there's white supremacy and that we need to be anti-racism and that we need to, like Black history is important. But like if you brought this conversation to like, you know, cable news or whatever, it'd be, we should cancel Black History Month because it's racist to recognize Black people exist, or like that would be the level of conversation. So I think like something I have been doing, especially in the past like year, is I've been participating in like these community spaces or workshops or whatever you want to call them with other Asian and Asian American people where we look at like Asian American history, and we talk about like history that's not necessarily talked about or like go a little deeper into it. But part of that, that's the part that to me it's like what's important about history is like the way history helps us and helps inform who we are and what we want from the world. And I think like that is a more relevant I think it's just like a more relevant and meaningful like approach towards like talking about history for at least for like Black people and people of color. I'll just say for Asian people, I don't want to speak for anyone else, is to talk about it in community with others and as a way to like inform how we want to move forward. I also want to say like, I think revisionism or like gets like a dirty connotation. And I think for some good reason, but I also want to say like, just like the root word just means like looking at something again. So like historical revisionism, like when people like went back and like say like our history is like missing Black people, it's missing Indigenous history, like we need to go back and like add those perspectives again. That is revisionism. And I think like revisionism, I think in itself is neutral. It's like you have to get to like, what are the values and intent of the person doing the revisioning? And I'm going to stop there.
I don't think I agree with you with regards to the revisionist history being neutral if you're having to revise an incorrect story to begin with from a perspective that doesn't include those who were left out of the original story, right? So I'm having a hard time understanding.
So I'm saying revisionism is neutral in that the act of looking at history and like telling it in a different way. So like the lost cause mythology is revisionism with the values of like wanting to uphold the Confederacy and so on. Going back and like, you know, retelling the story of like European invasion of the Americas from an indigenous perspective. That is revisionism with these sort of values. So like revisionism is a tool. I guess what I'm saying is revisionism in terms of like retelling a story or re-examining a story in itself is just a tool. So it's like neutral. It depends on who was doing the revisioning.
Right. So it's like the word itself means to kind of re-look at something or to revise, and that technically anybody can revise, can be a revisionist, but it's really about the kind of like, what is the aim of it? So you have conservative kind of revisionist stuff. You have like, you know, the lost cause that you brought up. Like if we're going and saying, hey, we need to be looking at, you know, this element from this perspective, then that can also be considered revisionist. Just revising the history that we've all been taught because of our history books, even though that history that we originally learned is not the true history to begin with, but it's called revisionist just because it's being looked at it again.
Well, I get that part. I just think we still have to do an analysis of power. And I'm just wary when we go and say that there are some words that are kind of objective or neutral. The luxury to look up from survival to reimagine history comes with a level of power to do so in agency. And that is usually that of the victor, however they try to do it for whatever story. So like the current story of race and racism is not, it mutates as well. And MLK has mutated from like a communist pig who hated white people to like the hero of white people. And that's revisionism as well. So I think that there has to be an analysis of power in that.
Dana?
I don't know where to start. This has been such a helpful discussion to me. I think I came in, let me go a couple weeks back. A couple weeks back, I was like, Black History Month. And then we, BRJA, did a sort of webinar type thing on Black History Month. And I left our own things being like, no more Black History Month. It's only ever used as a smoke screen for, you know, diversity, masking as something else. So it's terrible. And then I come here, appreciate the comments about out of sight, out of mind. In a sense, it's very easy if we didn't have Black History Month to like for white folks and folks in power to be just like, all right, yeah, whatever. So that bit of visibility that is sort of forced in, even if it's usually not used very well, seems like a good argument to me. Keep thinking about the Super Bowl and how like sort of radically diverse it was in a lot of ways, how Black focused it was in a lot of ways, and how that doesn't change the fact that the NFL is like horrible in terms of Black coaches and the whole head injury thing. And like, you know, and so thinking about that, and I appreciated the diversity of it. I thought it was awesome. But at the same time, when that feels like that's used to mask the horrible inequities and lack of racial inclusion, then that feels like it feels complicated to me. It's not just there and it's neutral. If it actively keeps us, allows them to hide, allows them to say to normie folk, well, look how diverse it was. We're making steps, we're making strides. And so, yeah, it feels complicated, but I appreciate how
this discussion has made my own view much more complex.
And Dana, you're reminding me of and somebody else had said something that made me think of it, of the illusion that this quote unquote awakening that happened in 2020 is then the change of the way that the United States and that America is going to act, right? Is that they're going to bend over backwards to make sure that there's representation and diversity of Black faces, when actually at some point, I don't know when, and it's going to be like, oh, that's not in style anymore. Okay, we're going to go back to how things were, right? And so there is this myth or this understanding, this kind of like false hope that it's like, oh, finally, white America is seeing us and seeing the importance of Black folks and seeing that we need to be part of the Super Bowl. We need to be included in this, blah, blah, blah. That soon that's going to dry up. Soon that's going to dry up. I don't know when, don't know how long, but soon it's going to dry up. And I will say that it is a time that some resources have been allocated, some exposure and things to also feed into this like time of like Black excellence, right? That we're moving up. It's Black excellence. And yeah, I just want to put that out there because I am already worried about whenever that time period is where the rug is swept from underneath of us, that it's like, actually, it's now fine to just be as racist and anti-Black as we were before, and Black folks being shook. Go ahead, Erica.
Feels like smokescreen though, right? So we also recognized during the pandemic those abortion laws that were passed and other killings of Black people, right? You know what I mean? Like it's like, hey, look, Rihanna is doing this thing, or then, you know, Super Bowl has this thing going on, this one big event during the year. So look at this shiny new object while we go over here and murder some other folks, while we go over here and cut back curriculum, while we go over here and undercut funding for healthcare. And you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's
even in the NFL. I mean, they were like, hey, we want to be able to kneel and protest police brutality. And they said, oh, we'll hire Jay-Z to do the talent. Who asked for a talent agent?
They also put in racism at the end, like on the field. Like, so like where, so it was like on one end it said in racism, on the other end it was like, it takes all of us. And it was like, someone did a touchdown. I was like, does that say in racism? Like, it says in racism. And it's like everything, like, everything is like a performance. Everything is like a sticker that you put on. And it's just like, that's kind of warped. It's really wild. And like I said, like even with the NFL, like this is the first Super Bowl with 2 Black QBs. Like the majority of the players are Black. This is the first one. That is insane. Like, and then you have in racism on your feet. Like, what? I think that, you know, like I said, it's one of those things about it is gonna take all of us. It's gonna take the classrooms, it's gonna take like the kind of smaller like books and organizations mentioning things, but it's also gonna take, you know, orgs like BRJA or people who are doing anti-racism, anti-oppression work to really educate in different ways, in different facets. So with our newspapers, our programming, you know, like even in our classrooms, like having teachers that are gonna dedicate like real world conversations, how this looks. And also, what does it mean to look and study history? Because part of the reason why this continues to happen is because of the way that we study history. You know, we study like a very linear thing. That's not the way it works. And so, you know, I think that we are in a very interesting space. I don't think we're in a space of like, oh, well, everyone's open to knowing, but I do think we have a lot more tools at our disposal to get information out there. And that's a really important thing. That's something that we can use to our advantage. And 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 really, and then also, like, what does it mean to celebrate for yourself? Because for some people, it's not like teaching other folks, and it's not, like going to events, but like really kind of redefining what it means, and making sure that folks know it has to be a both and. I also put the link from that website with the different themes, and it has like a nice write-up, and it has past themes since like 1930 something, so 1928, I think. So just put that in the chat.
One of the things BRJ is known for is action planning at the end of its workshops, and that Anthony has so cleverly been trying to push us towards having a strategy for Black History Month. And so I think one of the things that we can do, and like an actionable thing, is to think about, where don't we typically look to examine history, right? And to peel back those layers in our various disciplines. So, I'm a policy analyst. What policies have been constructed when we think about things that our nation's agencies are working on, like data modernization? How are we leaving people out of it? I think that certain type of questioning that continues to hold people accountable and question like what's happening in these marginal spaces, because by the time we're looking at it in mass, the opportunity is gone. And granted, I know that it is a luxury to think about the future, because that means that you've got a whole lot of time on your hand. But still, I feel like that's one of the ways that we can strategize about like liberation and moving toward liberation, by peeling back those layers of where have we not focused and shed the light on.
Other folks, what are you thinking about as we're closing out on, if you're having a strong, this is the action moving forward that I'm thinking about, or even if the action is, these are the questions that I need to think about as my action?
I guess I'm questioning if there will be any progress if no acknowledgement can actually be made about anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I'm thinking through, like, what does it mean to, like using this year's theme of Black resistance? What does it mean to make sure that the actual history is being told? Is that doing, like, one of the projects I'm doing in my school right now is like looking at like book clubs or social justice book clubs more specifically. Like, so creating spaces where learning can happen, creating spaces where like more conversations like this one can happen and people can think through what does it mean. I think that's also part of this work. So how do I do that in my own kind of circle of or sphere of influence, is something I'm thinking about moving away from this event.
Mm-hmm.
Related to what people have just said, I think the question of why and the question of purpose that came up in the webinars a lot is one that's sticking with me. Why are we celebrating Black History Month? Are we celebrating it? Are we doing something else with it? What is that? And that level of precision, and to Erica's point, say within organizations, within sectors, that kind of particularity feels important. And then somebody had also mentioned affinity spaces. And I think it's really important for white folks to get together and really talk about what are we doing here? And because there's so much of white people rules around, well, it's Black History Month, we're supposed to celebrate it. And it's really unquestioned and thoughtless, and puts a lot of burden and sometimes harm on people of color. And so let's not do that. Anyway, so yeah, affinity spaces, I think, are a thing to think about for me.
I think that in doing this, it helped me get to the discomfort, the unfortunate discomfort that there is no throwaway Black History Month, it should be canceled, and there is no 100%, oh yeah, we should keep it, is that it's this continuing ideas and questionings of how do we make it better or repurpose some things or re-strategize about some stuff, which actually is kind of a fit for everything, because racism and white supremacy mutates, because we evolve as a people, then that strategy should look different, or that approach to that should look different. And so that we will never arrive at a point in which it is perfect, just like anything else. And so while it was titled, should it be canceled, yes or not, that it's not that easy as of a throwaway topic. Yeah. I'm gonna move into closing thoughts, unless somebody's like, oh my gosh, I really wanted to talk first.
No, this was a lot to think about, actually.
So hope with that, that the things that you wrote down, that you revisit, do some more thinking on. This will be posted to our YouTube. And I also wanted to plug, which is not in our slides, is that every Wednesday this month on IG Live at 7 p.m. we are doing Black Service Provider Blast, where we're talking to different Black service providers about the talented and excellent things that they offer. This Wednesday, I'll be talking to a service provider that provides administrative assistance. And she does that as her company. And then our second one is a real estate agent. Yeah. And so each week we're trying to get two. The following week we have a Reiki practitioner and a tattoo artist for the following week. So hop on IG Live with us Wednesdays at 7, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Julia, to do the rest of the closing announcements.
All right, so I want to thank you all for joining BRJA this wonderful Monday evening. This is kind of a nice talk we had about Black history, so I want to thank you all for giving your input, and I hope that you continue to do that work after you have left this Zoom. As I mentioned, our next event next month is going to be talking about undocumented news that we really kind of don't hear about often. Kind of our second iteration of this. You can look at the first one, I believe, on our YouTube channel, as well as the one we just did. Dana is sharing it. Unreported news on March 13th at 6 p.m. It'll be on Zoom. So look out for the Facebook and Instagram, and I think we're on Eventbrite kind of posting about those events, as well as others coming up in the year. If you would like to donate to us, you can go to that slide. You can do so on our website. There it is. You can support our work financially. You can go to bemoreantiracist.org/donate, and you can set up how you would like to do that, either be a monthly sustainer or a one-time donor. You can also use this QR code to go to that website without typing everything in. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion, and we hope that you, come back for more discussions and events like these. So enjoy the rest of your Monday, and we'll talk to you soon.